I'm on the line with Captain Weiner, or is that name already taken? How shall I refer to you?
That's fresh. You can call me Willie Weiner.
Great.
Captain Weiner's the first, so we can go with that.
Great. I can call you Captain for short. So your channel, for people who don't know, if you just glance at your channel, let's say a lot of the emphasis is on fitness and health. And I'd say you're taking, like myself, you're someone who not only doesn't pretend to be a professional athlete, you emphasize the extent to which you're a normal person and not a professional athlete, and the extent to which your advice is compatible with the normal lives of normal people who have full-time jobs. Would that be fair to say, or?
That's completely accurate, yes.
Right. Mm-hmm. So anyway, obviously you have a list of questions you want to ask me, which is great. But I mean, I'm assuming you turned the corner at some point and decided that you wanted to paint a bunch of slogans on the wall of your the walls of your garage and set up a home gym. Can I just ask what was the inspiration for that specifically? Just because most people do work out at a gym or
Right.
or don't work out at all. So what for you? What made you interested in making that kind of commitment?
All right, so let's start off with the home gym thing. The whole reason I wanted to work out at home was because of somewhat of an inspiration from Tony Horton of P90X and Scooby of the earlier years of YouTube, where he would tell you that fitness is free and that you don't have to go to a gym. You can get fit at home. But lately,
I remember that guy. Yeah, go on.
Lately, it's become more of a convenience thing where I don't want to carry a new set of clothes. I don't want to drive 10 minutes to the gym. I just want to work out, get my stuff done, go back upstairs, take a shower, and be on my way.
Right.
But as far as the inspiration for doing these kinds of workouts, it's nothing special. And I feel like most people need to understand that you're not going to get a six-pack in 3 months.
Right.
I mean, if you do, crazy genetics or whatever, whatever the reason is, good, healthy eating. But I'm just trying to be realistic here. And that if you want realistic results, it's going to take a long time, i.e. 1 year or more.
Right.
So I just want to remind people that we're average people, some of us below average. It takes us a while to do one pull-up. It takes other people a long time to do 5 push-ups. If you can't pick up a standard 135 pounds, that's fine. Just show up. You don't have to show up and go hard. Just show up. Yeah. And eventually you'll get to where you need to be.
Well, I've just gone through that process with my girlfriend, Melissa. I might as well have been her personal trainer for the last year and a half or coming up on 2 years now. When she first met me, she had literally never lifted any weight in her life. She'd never had any form. Yeah, nothing. And her muscular development was at a really, really low level in terms of just being. So one of the exercises I'm a big fan of is the upright row. People may, but it's a very simple exercise where you're lifting the bar. And so when we were starting with exercises like that, she couldn't do 1 rep with the bar. She couldn't really do arm curls with 5-pound weights,
Wow.
And so we were really starting from zero. It really was like rehabilitating a disabled person in some ways. But the difference is she's not disabled. Very rapidly she did make progress. I think she is still not able to do 1 push-up or 1 chin-up, however. Those are body weight exercises. But yeah, I've seen her come a long, long way. So that was interesting. I never had any experience like that before. I've never been anybody's personal trainer. And so the one thing I want to say before we move on, I don't think this is going to be really a fitness related discussion, but I think it's really easy for people to say that exercise and life should not be 2 separate things, that exercise should just be part of your life. But in the 21st century, that's true for a very small percentage of the population. So you've watched my channel. As I always mention that I used to live in Laos and Cambodia. I've lived in other places that get mentioned less often. I very rarely say, I used to live in Hong Kong. It's also true. I used to live in Hong Kong. But anyway, I did meet people in Laos who really had such physically tough jobs, like really, really hard work in agriculture. And one guy who literally carried sacks of concrete on his shoulder for a living, who built up unbelievable physical strength doing those jobs, Yeah. And you could even tell when you shook their hand, the amount of strength in the forearm, was up there. But, I mean, today in 2018, that's, in Canada or the United States or Western Europe, an insignificant number of people have exercise as part of their jobs and part of their daily life.
Right.
So we have to make these kinds of decisions. Whether the right thing for you is to have a gym at home, get some weights or whatever. Or, I've had times in my life when I worked out using 5-liter bottles of water. I had no gym, I had no way of working out, and I'd get some big jugs of water, and I'd do, different kinds of presses and lifts with those. And there'd be a small mountain or something nearby, and I'd run up and down that mountain. When I was just living in China now, there was a staircase. There are some videos showing this. There's this big, big staircase leading up to the university. It's really just like a decorative staircase. And I'd repeatedly run up and down those stairs, stone stairs. I find ways to work in it. But again, the point being, I'm not an athlete. I'm not an Instagram model. Exactly. Right. This is my middle age. I'm now 40 years old. But yeah, I don't look like any of my relatives when they were 40 years old. If you just look back one generation, look at any of my blood relations, what they look like at 40. It's a huge, huge difference. So
I think you'd fit in perfectly here at Weiner Workouts. Safe to say, we don't have the best looking people, but just that's just the way it is. We're not Instagram models. We're not out here to be flashy. It's just the way things are, and I think we represent a very large majority of the population. Well, especially those that are just getting into fitness. But
right. And as you know,
one side of our discussion.
I don't think it's what you really want to talk about in this interview, but I mean, all of this is happening in the shadow of the steroids phenomenon. Yes. I was going to say steroids epidemic, but when I was in China, so I don't lift that heavy because I don't want to push my luck and get injured. Currently, I bench press 230 pounds. I'm going to repeat. Very nice. Not kilograms. Pounds, because I'm in Canada. 230 pounds. But when I was in China, there were these guys who were lifting 1/4 and 1/5 of what I lift, like really, really light lifts, and with these huge round muscles. And I just thought, what's going on with that? And I was working out so regularly at the gym. At first, I just thought, they're doing something else in their workout I'm not seeing. Like when I'm not here, they must be really lifting heavy weights or something. And no, I mean, again, I saw the same guys repeatedly over time. It's steroids. I mean, that's what it is.
It has to be.
Right. When you're on juice, you can lift 50 pounds and still have those kinds of big projecting, bulging muscles. And that's really what's called the movie star look. Is people who don't push the limits with steroids, people who are not bodybuilders, but you get those results. Yeah. And as soon as I figured that out, I realized why steroids are such an epidemic. The stereotype is like an Olympic athlete with steroids. Working really, really hard and then using steroids to get an extra 5% out of your performance. But that's not the epidemic. The epidemic is millions of people using steroids and being lazy. That's appealing. Using steroids and not working out hard and getting those kinds of results. So and for the next generation, I mean, it's sad, but I can't imagine the genie going back into the bottle. I think like cocaine and heroin, this is going to become a permanent part of our drug landscape. So going forward, I think that's the other challenge with fitness being part of your life. Yeah. Right, is a commitment one way or another to be clean, and what that really means. Yeah.
All right, fair enough. Well, I think that's a good introduction. Breaking the ice, very nice segue into what we're going to be discussing. And if I may, I'm going to be pulling up the topics of discussion for today. So for those of you guys that have made it this far, I'm probably going to timestamp all of these so that they want to skip through or don't want to hear anything else. The topics of discussion for today are going to be effective vegan activism and non-effective or ineffective vegan activism. The other topic of discussion we're going to be talking about is carnivore dieters, in specific, Vegetable Police and Kasumi Chris. A couple of others might show up.
Two of my favorite people. Go on, yeah.
And another topic of discussion, mental and physical health issues among vegans, and just something for a little bit of fun, maybe a little controversy, social and psychological effects of video games.
Yeah, sure.
So I hope you guys make it through. We don't know how long this discussion might last. It could be an hour, 2, maybe even 3, but we're just going to see how this rolls. The timestamps will be in the description. And Isa, why don't you kick us off, since you have a lot of knowledge on vegan activism, seeing that you are one or you advocate for it, that you've been around the scene, and you know what good and bad looks like. So I take your word for it.
Well, I remember I had a conversation with Isaac recently. So Isaac's YouTube name is Ask Yourself, and he was talking to me about direct action everywhere. So I think there's a playlist of like 30 videos criticizing direct action everywhere. I can check, but it is one of the playlists with the most videos of any playlist on my channel. I remember something Isaac said to me very unpretentiously, a very down-to-earth way, which is, I think, true of both of us. He said, look, Isaac, I think that both you and I are very reluctant to just say, this is bad for veganism. It's so intellectually lazy, it's kind of too easy to just dismiss something as being quote-unquote bad for veganism. And we're critical of other YouTubers when they do that. So it really, in the past, that was more like 2016. It used to be that YouTube channels were piled up with people pointing the finger and saying this person is bad for veganism. And people have done it to me, of course. People pointed the finger at me and said that I'm bad for veganism because basically I ask some inconvenient philosophical questions and sometimes come to difficult and conflicting answers to them. But sure, there is some point at which you have to start making judgments about what is good and bad for veganism, and ultimately what is a waste of your time. So, direct action everywhere is the easy case study to point to for looking at effective and ineffective activism. And the irony is they were founded by a guy named Wayne Seong. They were founded with the resolution to scientifically advance vegan activism by examining what works and what doesn't with social science methods, and that they would throw away the vestiges of the past. They would throw away standing on a street corner with pamphlets and free vegan muffins, giving muffins and pamphlets to people to spread veganism that way, that their research and new scientific findings were going to open up the golden path to a brighter future in vegan activism. Now, what we've seen as they pursued down that golden path are many aberrations, including, trying to interrupt Bernie Sanders when Bernie Sanders is doing a public rally, trying to interrupt Hillary Clinton, trying to run onto a baseball field with a banner telling people to go vegan, and then immediately being pounced on by the police. These are all real examples. Them getting arrested and beat up, trying to disrupt is their key term, rodeos, as I say, baseball games, public events, political events that have nothing to do with them. So we've seen them go down a bumpy road of showing us all the things not to do in vegan activism. So that's one case study where, you're examining these things and asking these questions. In that case, I think you're far enough over the line in a number of ways that, you can say, look, this is a bad for veganism, and if my own sister or brother were asking me for advice, if they wanted to join Direct Action Everywhere, I would really urge them not to. Now, other discussions on the channel, though, are not as black and white. Sorry, don't worry, you have to talk. But I was going to say, in my discussion, by contrast, my discussion of what is and isn't effective about the so-called Cube of Truth movement, that's more in a gray area where ultimately my conclusion is this is a waste of your time, this is poorly organized, the particular guy in charge is no good, but these problems are not so fundamental. Direct Action Everywhere, there are also questions of them breaking laws and doing things that are illegal and getting themselves put in prison and facing criminal charges. I do not think anyone going to jail is an effective form of activism, so we are more talking about those hard issues, and those issues don't exist in the context of offering criticism of the Cube of Truth method. So yeah, that's all I'd say. Not all of this criticism is equally loaded, but precisely in engaging those discussions, I think everyone involved, everyone in the audience, everyone who's willing to ask those questions along with me, they end up looking at their own lives, what's possible and practicable, what they can do to save the planet, to do something positive for the vegan movement. And I think people come up with new and creative approaches because they engage in that critique.
So I like the fact that you brought up the discussion you had with Isaac, because you guys are not quick to point a finger. You think twice before you criticize, judge, or even belittle a person that's giving bad vegan activism. So
I'm glad you feel that way. I think many people would say the opposite. Go on, yeah.
Yeah. No, but it's good that we're thinking about these things before we're actually judging them. And that's one of those things, okay, so you brought up the case study, right? Well, that's important for the audience to know. What I kind of wanted to hear was more of your personal thoughts on where vegan activism is today, and some examples that you see that you believe are ineffective or effective. Because I'm willing to provide an example from me, but that's going to be later on. But you mentioned in many of your videos how there are some people that take these permanent vacations where
Right.
they receive donations from their supporters on Patreon, and they take that money and they spend it, on vacation, on specific foods, when they could be donating it to a different charity, or they could be using their resources a lot better.
Yeah.
Or then you have the opposite side where there are people. I think it was in the Earthling Ed vegan march in London where he said that they're going to take no days off. That video in
That's right.
particular
I remember that. No days off. Right.
the vegan clown college one. I mean, it was like really funny, but at the same time, it was scary because you have these people telling you that they're going to take no days off, and then there's the
The people who are taking every day off for
so,
vacation. Yeah, it's true.
So, I mean, I don't know how to.
I hadn't thought of it that way. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Like, what do you think of the bad versus the good there?
Look, I mean, the easy example of something good I can point to, they're not perfect, is PCRM. So that is an acronym for Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. So when people say they want a concrete example of something within veganism that's positive, I point to PCRM and I say, look, what we need are 5 or 6 other organizations like PCRM. So I'll say a little bit more about why that is in a moment.
Sure.
But outside of veganism, I also point to groups like Mothers Against Drunk Driving, and I point to the historical success of the gay rights movement. So within my lifetime, those are 2 really successful, really powerful, movements and types of organizations. In one case, it's a unique organization. And they don't use tactics like direct action everywhere. I mean, Mothers Against Drunk Driving does not show up at a beer store and start screaming at people and saying, don't you realize my son died in a car accident, or this kind of thing. They don't put on this kind of spectacle. They don't interrupt a baseball game and say, how can you people drink alcohol? Don't you know it causes brain damage? By the way,
Right.
Alcohol literally causes brain damage. just to mention, there actually is a sense of urgency. And, I have, I just mentioned, I have my father had 9 kids. So I have, brothers who, some of them I think were born about as smart as I am. And after many years of use of drugs and alcohol, moderate use, none of them are considered alcoholics. They're not so bright anymore. So, I mean, the toll that alcohol takes is very real. And, I'm partly joking, but it's not hard to imagine an anti-alcohol movement that would use some of these tactics that vegans are infamous for. Frankly, that people ridicule us for. It's easy to imagine being so passionate about, getting rid of alcohol, or drunk driving specifically. You do that. So these are highly professional, highly effective examples. Sorry, so I should say, so I mentioned Mothers Against Drunk Driving, I mentioned PCRM, and within the gay rights movement, I'm not talking about people marching naked and throwing parties and this kind of thing. Especially, I think it's important to recognize there was a professionalized and legal element of that struggle and that challenge, which we are really lacking in veganism by contrast. Now, that's not the whole. I mean, gay rights involved also, it did involve a lot of naked partying and this kind of thing. There were other elements, but that's not particularly what I'm alluding to here. I point out in my video on community, it was this phenomenon where, if the chief of police made homophobic remarks, the newspapers would know to phone up a gay organization. There were these various gay lobbying organizations and get their response to the homophobic remarks made by the police commissioners. That was ongoing for decades. But the existence of those organizations, those more professional gay rights organizations, and the fact that the newspaper knew to call them and that their opinion mattered, that's a kind of legitimacy and level of organization that veganism is largely lacking. The easy exception being PCRM. So PCRM are engaged in lobbying the government on a variety of issues. Some of them are more ethically defined animal rights issues. Some of them are more clearly defined in terms of science. And their form of activism does involve paying lawyers to take people to court. It does involve, challenging misinformation that promotes the dairy industry and egg industry as healthy and that kind of thing. So I think that's a disruption of a very different kind, and disputing whether or not government guidelines on diet and that kind of thing are healthy. But they do actually include vegan ethics in their remit. And this came up in a very different discussion. We're talking about race and ethnicity within veganism, but they are ultimately a somewhat elitist organization. I am, I'm noting that as something for criticism, or something where, not that we should criticize PCRM, but that creates opportunities for other people to do this. PCRM is predominantly white, wealthy people with diplomas in the medical sciences. Well, how about, an organization taking on the same issues in the same way that's predominantly Chinese people from Los Angeles? I was just in Los Angeles. There are suburbs there that are 40% Chinese. How about an organization that's predominantly Hispanic people from San Diego, and so on and so forth? There are a million other constituencies that could get organized to make a difference this way on one issue or another. How about an organization like PCRM that just deals with leather, health impacts of leather, ecology of leather, even the economics of leather, and saying, hey, as a society, we need to transition away from being a leather-based society. And again, regardless of the ethnicity or affluence of the people involved, that you could have the founding members and could be former workers in the leather industry, leather tanning industry, who know how toxic and dangerous the chemicals are. Whatever. Could be drawn from any stratum. But my point is not to say that it's a bad thing that PCRM is predominantly of this wealthy white character, but to point out there are opportunities to get organized and give a voice to a lot of other segments of vegan society, or even just ecologically concerned society. You could organize a movement that was entirely fishermen or ex-fishermen dealing, a vegan approach to the fishing industry and devastation, the ecological devastation of the oceans. And that might be predominantly white people on the east coast of Canada in Halifax or something. Again, my point is not to simplify a kind of ethnic stereotype here, but to recognize, the kind of nuanced local and global challenge that we're facing moving forward. That's the most positive answer I can give you. And it would be a lot... it would be a lot easier for me to give a kind of cynical response and say that I don't see anything positive happening anywhere. Obviously, it's a lot easier to find bad than it is to find good.
Right. Well, what would you consider to be bad, ineffective, non-effective? Just something that I don't want to say is a detriment to veganism, but people that are really putting in an effort, but you not seeing the results. Because it's easy to I know there was that whole huge debacle 2-3 years ago with Freely and Durian Rider.
Right.
And, I'm not going to sit there and say I never liked them, because they did make people go vegan. So at the very least, I have to give them credit to that. But as far as their diets are concerned, as far as the message that they're spreading across, it's coming off real cult-like. And I don't feel like that's very positive. It's not to say that it's negative, but I don't see it helping the vegan movement. And I feel like we need to address, issues like that coming into the future.
Well, right, but also, I think it's also now kind of over. I mean, it ended in failure. I mean, that's, I'm not saying that in a boastful way, but I think...
The Raw Till 4 movement?
Yeah, I would say it's now over. I mean, it fizzled out in, say, 2017. I mean, it's just a tiny shadow of its former self. So it was huge in 2015, 2016, and then fell apart. And, this wouldn't be said about other movements. But if we really want to go big, the single biggest in the world is what's known in America as the Loving Hut. So Loving Hut is the world's largest chain of vegan restaurants.
Right.
And it is indeed run by a new religion. I'm saying new religion and not cult. It's run by a new religion which is called the Supreme Master Ching Hai Foundation, or Supreme Master Ching Hai Group, the followers of Supreme Master Ching Hai, which doesn't sound like a cult at all. No, it's a new religion. So I think a lot of people, if you just go to Wikipedia or just do a little bit of looking into who is behind Loving Hut, you're going to be a bit shocked. Loving Hut is huge. It's here to stay. It's lasting. They have at least 2 cable TV channels or satellite TV channels, but they're real, they're 24-hour broadcasting channels in many languages. So, they have that. They have a kind of footprint. Frankly, it's way more impressive than anything PETA has ever done. People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals is big, but the Loving Hut group, the Supreme Master Ching Hai group, is much bigger. And emotionally, the aspect of what they do that appeals to me most is the anti-war advocacy. So they've linked veganism, which is natural, but different people link it to different things. They've linked it to criticism of how many people are being killed in Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria and all these conflicts. So they link it to an anti-war message, which can be very emotionally powerful. I mean, in terms of watching their video, their propagandists. Now, unfortunately, their beliefs are magical and insane. I do not believe in breatharianism. I do not believe that, they believe in a whole crazy scheme of karma and reincarnation, and that magically the reason why you don't starve to death when you're on this breatharian diet is that there are gods, and I forget it was the 9th level of heaven or the 7th level of heaven, who put a tube down and magically feed you, and they believe in a whole constellation of crazy stuff. And this is I'm not making this up. You can watch on their own TV channel. You can see what the Supreme Master herself says, what it is their religion consists of. So that's, if you want to go big, that's big.
Okay.
And then if you want to go small, I do think it's worthwhile to point to some of these other YouTubers, some of these people on YouTube, and say, hey, this is to quote the rapper 50 Cent, you've been hustling a long time, and you ain't got nothing. So, somebody really inoffensive like Ryan and Angie from Happy Healthy Vegan, they do offend me, but whatever, I've had my conflict with them. Okay, well, you guys had all the money and all these advantages being based in LA. Yeah, this audience has done this. What have you accomplished in the last 5 years? And now what are you going to accomplish in the next 5 years? I think we all know the answer is nothing. Unnatural Vegan, many of these other people I've criticized, I really think they're going nowhere, even though they have a kind of veneer of success. So those are problems, and I think that comment I made would also apply to Freely Enduring Rider. There are a lot of other things wrong with Freely Enduring Rider also, but they briefly had this movement organized in Chiang Mai. I was there. It was only a few dozen people, but that's all dead and dissipated and so on. So again, what did they accomplish in the last 5 years? What are they going to accomplish in the next 5 years? It's pretty grim.
So you bring up two names in particular about vegan YouTubers, and I understand that they're on a smaller scale of things. You bring up Angie and Ryan, right, and you bring up Unnatural Vegan. Now, here's the deal with what I see with them, right? Like, again, I take no offense because I think that it's important that we learn from all aspects. Although we might disagree on some points, it's always nice to hear the other side. But the question that gets raised with these particular YouTubers, and there's many like them, right? You see them all the time, and honestly, it's kind of cringy because you see them do these what I eat in a day videos. They play the same music, they're eating the same foods, and they're just basically advocating their lifestyle. Right. Which is fine. There's no harm in that. You have every right to do so. But as a vegan, like, the question that I wanted to ask is being vegan enough? Right? Like, we look at it as a social, political, philosophical movement to end all of animal exploitation and cruelty. And I know that we're doing our part by not eating animals or their byproducts like milk and cheese and whatnot. But is that enough? Or should we be taking more of a stance? Right. So you see, out there in phrasing the question, you already know the answer. No, yeah. Of course it's not enough. And we would say the same about gay rights. This is a great case for gay rights. Is it enough to just be gay? Is it enough to live in Saudi Arabia right now and just be gay? Is it enough, let's be blunt, to just suck dick? It's not enough. It's never going to be enough to just suck dick. It's never going to be enough. And we can all, pat ourselves in the back and feel like heroes for sucking each other's dicks. And at some point, you got to say, no, you know what? We actually need a political movement. We actually need some kind of, whether it's through lobbying government or protest, we have to get organized. Legislation, something, right? Right. Ultimately, this is a political and democratic struggle. And of course, in Saudi Arabia, it's also a religious struggle. Even here in Canada, it was a religious struggle to some extent. It was a struggle that took place within the Anglican Church and Catholic Church. But I mean, those churches aren't that powerful in Canada compared to majority Muslim countries. The role of religion there. But regardless, it's still a religious struggle in Israel too. By the way, just to give fair recognition that it's not particularly easy gay rights in Israel. So no, your own consumption, your own sex life, your own private lifestyle, it's never going to be enough. Now, the only caveat I put is, not everybody can do it. All my life I've known disabled people. I'm not going to say I have a lot of disabled friends at the moment. Different times in my life I've had friends who were disabled to different extents. There are people who can't really do anything just because they're physically disabled. There are people who can't really do anything due to extreme poverty. My own economic situation is pretty dire. I'm very limited in what I can do by my economic situation. I can't just fly to London and attend a conference in London, England or something. These are everything I do is a big decision financially. But
the question is, and this is my way of posing it, if not you, then who? And it's different. Right. It can't be everyone. I say this about different kinds of political and social movements. I used to learn Korean and Ojibwe and want to bring back those languages. I used to do humanitarian work in Cambodia. Not everybody can do humanitarian work in Cambodia. Not everybody can study Korean and Ojibwe. No, it's right. But somebody has to. And the question is, if not you, then who? And it gets pretty surreal when you're looking at someone who's ostensibly devoted their lives to the vegan movement. Ostensibly. Like Angie and Ryan from Happy Healthy Vegan, like Unnatural Vegan, also known as Swayze. When you look at somebody like that and they're not doing it, well, if not you, then who? You're a full-time vegan activist. You're being paid. I don't know, Mike the Vegan, anyone. What are you doing with this money and leisure and, platform and connections and network and power? You have some degree of, money, power, and respect. If not you, then who? So that's when it gets really weird. And there are some people who I think are trying to do everything they can. I'm not cynical about Earthling Ed. I think he probably is going to adapt and find new ways to be a vegan activist. I think he'll get bored of having the same conversation on the sidewalk again and again. Yeah. I think people will go on to either professionalize or specialize or do something better. But yeah, but the direct answer to your question is no. It's never just enough to be vegan. It can't possibly be. We all know that. Two, just as it's different in Saudi Arabia than Canada, there is a cultural and political question of context, what you can do, not you as an abstract, but you, if you're an architect, if you're a musician, if you're unemployed, they're different, if you're disabled, sure, there are constraints. But then finally, within the talent pool we got, the limited talent pool of people who are committed vegans, if not you, then who? If you can't make this sacrifice now. And I have one vegan friend. She wants to do real activism, and she thinks she's going to start when she's 55. Because she says, look, I have so many decades raising my kids, and then I have to do this, and then I have to do that. But she predicts she'll have enough money and leisure, free time and free money to really do activism when she's in her 50s.
That's reasonable. That's reasonable.
Yeah.
They're taking the real-life situation and trying to apply it in the world and see how it can work. And, I admire that. It's just, like me, I'm trying to make the, don't go off on me, but I'm trying to make the effort to do vegan activism more often than not, right? I'm trying to do my part by spreading the word at my school, at my university, all that stuff. And I know it's not enough, like not nearly enough as what I could normally do. But again, things come into play like supporting my family, transportation, these sorts of things, right? Like I'm not going out and trying to buy the fanciest piece of or article of clothing, right? Like I take my money and I'm going to spend it accordingly. It goes down to a point where I deny buying my family animal products when they want to eat it. Even though it's their money, I'm going to be like, no, if you want me to go buy it, you go drive to the store. I know it's 5 minutes away. I could easily do it. You're still going to get it, but I want them to go through that struggle. Now,
you know what's funny? I just got to jump in there. I'm 6'3". When I go grocery shopping, people sometimes ask me to take things down off the top shelf for them. I refuse to do
like, no.
Yeah, it's cute.
That's what you get for eating meat.
Yeah, I have to be. I'm self-effacing about it. I say, oh no, I couldn't possibly. And they say, what do you mean? You're told you can reach it. It's on the top shelf. And I say, oh no, it's not that I'm short. I'm vegan. So I do kind of make a joke of it, but the joke is real. I don't do it. I don't get it off.
No,
if you want to puppy
or something, you do it yourself. Yeah. Oh man, that's the nicest way of being an asshole. I have to admit, that's the nicest thing. That's the nicest.
Guilty. Guilty as charged.
I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. Oh. But anyways, no, I was gonna bring up a friend of mine. Who's very passionate. I know you don't like that word. I know you don't like it. You said it.
I'm cool with it. Yeah.
Because passion isn't just, it doesn't bring up positive connotations. There's some negative things and emotions and whatnot. But I have a friend of mine who subscribed to my YouTube channel after I had a discussion with Vegan Gains, and oh my God, this girl. If there was a word passionate and you looked up the definition, it's her. So I follow her on Instagram. Her name is Maria, by the way. So she'll probably watch this discussion. If she's watching this, she'll know I'm talking about her. She's from Sweden. And in Sweden, they fight for a lot of different social causes. So apparently there's like a huge presence of Nazis. I was not aware of that until she brought it to my attention. So she fights against Nazism. She fights against, animal products industry, all that fun stuff. And one thing I noticed every single day, I kid you not, she's out and about on the streets, at an animal farm, at the factory farms. She's out there and she's spreading the message. And she's shown me videos, she's shown me pictures where the police have gotten involved and had to be escorted. She tells me how they tip down deer hunting stands where they hunt deer. She hates hunters. And it's crazy. Like, the one thing that she's super adamant about are these stickers that she makes. So the way she travels is she'll use public transportation. She'll take these stickers everywhere she goes, like a good stack of like 100, 200 stickers, start pasting them everywhere. Go vegan, go vegan, go vegan. She's basically like leaving her footprint.
Yeah.
And it's not just her. Like, obviously it's a group and whatnot. So I admire that activism, because when I see your videos and these people taking vacations, this girl's not taking a vacation.
Right.
She is literally spending every minute of her life fighting for the animals and fighting for the cause. Environmentally, I don't think she really cares about health, even though she does yoga.
Yeah. I'm the same. I don't really care about health, but go on,
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so like, she's fighting in every way, shape, and form for veganism. And some might say like, wow, this is all this person has in their life. But the way that my friends aren't seeing, because I have a lot of friends that eat meat, and no matter what I say to them, it's not going to make them change. But with her, it's like, yes, this is her life, because it's something bigger than her. That's the way she sees it. She doesn't care if you run her over on the street. She doesn't care if you shoot her. I think she even got branded. I don't know if you've heard of that.
Yeah.
L214,
L269, forget the number. I think L269.
Something like that. Yeah. To me, like to us, like, I'm not calling her, abnormal, but like to the average person, this is.
It's on the unusual side of abnormal. It's somewhere on the spectrum, right? Yeah, sure.
I don't think I'd go to the extent of branding myself.
Right.
Like, I get the message they're trying to send, but I feel like there are different ways of doing it. But hers are completely suitable, especially if she's trying to spread the word.
Right.
Although I have to give it the backside, some people might see a different light to that and say to themselves, you know what? This is just crazy. I don't think, if all vegans are like that, I don't think I'd want to go vegan.
Right.
And that's where we get that double-edged sword. Like, do you have to go crazy? Do you have to do these crazy things? Like, yeah, I know if you want to see crazy results, you have to do crazy things, but that's not necessarily true, because tomorrow will pass and people will still continue eating meat. This is a long marathon. This is an Ironman, right? This is not something that you're going to win overnight. And I feel like most of the vegans in the YouTube community specifically needed to understand that it's okay. I mean, I know you're against reducitarianism, but for me, it's like, it's okay if somebody falls off on their vegan diet. We'll segue into the vegetable police, but I'm just going to put this little
Okay, well, look,
here,
so I know you're not asking me a question. I'm gonna respond as if it's a question.
Go ahead.
What ended the Vietnam War? So this may seem like it's totally unrelated, but it's not. For me, this really is the answer. Mm-hmm. Now, there were a lot of specific incidents during the Vietnam War that excited similar passions, and it's understandable. To my knowledge, only one man was ever actually fully prosecuted in a military court for misconduct in Vietnam. One excuse or another was always found to derail, delay, or cancel basically trials for war crimes, crimes against humanity, misconduct by U.S. soldiers in Vietnam. But that case was of a soldier having improper conduct with an underage girl in an interrogation room. He was raping a female child. And I think everybody who knew anything about that case knew this was not the only incident with this guy. There was a lot of rape in Vietnam. U.S. soldiers did rape a lot of women. There was torture. And some of the guys who committed the torture showed up at the House of Congress, what are called the Winter Soldier hearings, and complained.
Right.
So the guys carrying out, it's not even like speculative. They themselves had done this torture, and they wanted to give depositions to Congress and say, hey, this is kind of over the line in what we're doing. So that stuff, makes people passionate. To some extent, you wonder why are people so resigned to crimes against humanity being committed by U.S. soldiers. However, would it solve the problem? So what is the problem? Okay, first of all, The problem here we're addressing is specifically accountability and discipline in the U.S. Armed Forces. That is the problem. We're not talking about the broader question of whether or not you should invade Vietnam in the first place. The point is, given that you have an army in Vietnam, that you're raping and torturing people. Okay, so standards of human rights, decency, and then accountability when those standards are violated, discipline, etc. That's what you're talking about. Nobody could possibly believe, nobody's even going to debate with me, is the way to improve those standards in the U.S. military by doing what your friend Maria is doing. It can't possibly be. Now, what is the way to do it? Okay, then we can make a flow chart and say, okay, how are we going to actually address the question of raising standards of conduct and accountability for U.S. Armed Forces abroad? And I think that's a debate worth having, and that would be a political movement worth leading and devoting years of your life to, and people donating millions of dollars to. Ultimately, all these things have a price tag. But I sympathize with someone who just wants to, frankly, go crazy. And there were people in the 1960s, and I think probably still so now, just put up stickers saying the U.S. Army raped this person, the U.S. Army tortured this person, this is unacceptable, these are atrocities and crimes against humanity. But as soon as we take a step beyond that, we start thinking about outcomes and impacts, and we start thinking about how many hours and years of our life we're putting into it. We have to come to a better methodology. So that is my answer to the question, and there's a kind of necessary irony here because again, Direct Action Everywhere, they were founded on the promise that they were learning the lessons of history. And already with this one example, you see that it's impossible to just point to the lessons of history. That's one lesson I take from the history of the Vietnam War, and that's been a part of my life in various ways. Other people can read the same history and not take that lesson at all, and so on and so forth. But yeah, that's that's my answer.
No, I totally agree. I totally agree with you on that. Like, I don't think we're gonna have to argue on that point of view. It's just some people they do so much, but they don't realize that the magnitude that they're doing it at is very small, if not minimal.
Right. So, okay. So look, sorry, I have one more. Okay, great. That's a really good point. But look. Okay, so my comparison there was to ultimately to a question of discipline. You're asking the Army to be disciplined or to have self-discipline. And
accountability, right.
And in some ways, I think that is like the culture of meat eating, where you're looking, for most of us, you're looking at your own mother or your own father and saying, why can't you have some accountability? Why can't you have some self-discipline? So, I mean, I don't think it's totally irrelevant to speak in those kinds of loaded ethical terms of personal responsibility and accountability. And then there's a larger cultural scale to it also. There's the culture of the military, sure. Look, I am an atheist. I see a lot wrong with Islam. How really are you going to change a Muslim majority country culturally? How are we going to change Saudi Arabia or Indonesia or Malaysia? We could pick other examples. It's not going to be through Maria's tactics. Again, I'm not picking on Maria, but if you asked her, what if you were living in a country where 99% of the population is Muslim, like Indonesia? Is this what you do? Would you go around putting up stickers saying circumcision destroys 50% of the nerve endings in your penis? Circumcision is child abuse. There's a good example. A sticker that says circumcision is child abuse. Of course, on a scientific, factual level, I agree with this statement. Circumcision is terrible. However, on a political level, and even on an artistic level, artistically, this is an artistic and creative challenge. How are we going to change the culture? And this is why I'm using this. This is much different from the military question. I don't think there's so much of an artistic question and creative challenge. That's more of a purely political question. It's not going to be through these tactics. And on the contrary, you may get killed using her tactics in Saudi Arabia or Indonesia. Not even necessarily by the government, just local, sincerely religious people may take offense. And again, to be fair, Orthodox Jews in Israel may kill you if you piss off Orthodox and Hasidic Jews. So there are every so often religious conflicts of that even within Judaism. So that is the magnitude of the challenge we're up against. So again, I sympathize with people who are perhaps overcome with passion and want to do these things, but I do think we can say it's strategically, tactically, and even artistically or aesthetically kind of wrong. Yeah.
And I'm not trying to come at it from a, just arrogant standpoint, but like I studied criminal justice.
Oh yeah.
And I received a master's degree in criminal justice. And one thing we noticed, right, like it's one thing to sit there and fight the courts, or it's one thing to sit there and fight people being put in office as judge or what have you. And then it's another thing to lobby, and it's another thing to write to lawyers. It's another thing to actually become a lawyer. It's another thing to join Congress. Like, it's one thing to sit there and complain about the atrocities and the injustices that are going on in the United States. This is clear and evident. We know that the prison rates are disproportionate among blacks than they are with whites. Something's going on. Something's out of whack, not someone, right? But if we expect anything to change, we can't just sit there and point fingers and say, this guy's racist, that guy's racist. Like, okay, yeah, we have evidence to show that they're allegedly racist. We can't prove it 100%. We can't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. But your question that you rhetorically asked many of your viewers, what are you going to What are you going to do to change it?
Right.
Like, sitting there pointing the finger is not going to do a damn thing. So it's important for us to actually take charge and realize that if you want to fight for veganism, it's not a 2-day thing. It's not a 90-day thing. Challenge 22 is great to get somebody started, but this needs to be.
I think it's a 300-year thing. I do. Yeah. I'm just being honest. I think veganism is a 300-year struggle. And if you look at, I think it is fair to say, what is the future of Saudi Arabia over 300 years? I think that is. Yeah, sure. I think that is the kind of timeline. Which for me is not an excuse for indifference, but cultural and human rights progress. Even China, it's incredibly depressing. What's really possible in the next 50 years in communist China? You worry. So yeah, I do see these things as very deep, very long-term struggles. Now, okay, quick devil's advocate. What's the best thing about Maria's approach? 2, 1, she's going to meet other people who also care about it and want to make a difference. And that is very positive. I say that all the time. One of the main reasons I came on the internet was to make friends, meet colleagues, get organized, save the world. You can't do it alone. So she's probably going to be less isolated because she's doing this form of activism than she otherwise would be. And point 2, there is an educational and learning process involved. Now, okay, some people are so stupid they're not going to learn from anything. I remember I got a story. So, I used to do humanitarian work, and I got a story from someone else doing humanitarian work. We were in Southeast Asia, but this woman had previously been in Africa, in an area in Africa where there was a civil war going on. And she met a white tourist who signed up to fight with the communist rebels in this civil war in Africa as a tourist, And I asked her, I said, so at what point did he stop and reconsider the ethics or the morality of what she was doing? She said, you know what it was? One day, the guy standing right next to him got shot in the head. That's, in his case, that's what it took, was standing next to someone who gets shot in the head. Sorry to laugh, guys, but it's gruesome. And I assume she didn't. I assume he would have, cradled this guy as he was dying and stuff. I assume he would have. I don't think he just ran away. I assume he, tried to help this guy or something too. I don't know. And then he started to ask himself the tough questions. So even if it is, shall we say, negative learning from seeing things go wrong, it's probably true that she's going to look around. Again, even someone, most people I've spoken to who were involved with Direct Action Everywhere, they got involved, they saw what the organization was doing wrong, and then they said, ooh, this is really messed up. Financially, organizationally, ethically, and running onto a baseball field for 30 seconds and then go spend a week in prison, because it's not that serious a charge, don't get me wrong, but still, the legal stuff is a big deal. This is not effective. This is not worth it. So, Pete, there is a learning process that goes on also. So I would say those are the two most positive things about Maria's approach. Yeah.
Okay, good stuff. I think I want to conclude on that topic.
Good.
I think we got some good things out there. The next thing I want to bring up is carnivore dieters, in specific Vegetable Police, Kasumi Chris. And underneath this category, I have written down 3 sub-points. No evidence for the carnivore diet, social pressures of veganism, and then the third one being an us versus them mentality. So why don't we go ahead and start off by asking each other or talking to each other about how we feel of these 2 YouTubers in particular and what made them switch.
But look, I think point 0 on the list here is human beings seeking attention. And attention-seeking behavior. Now, look, I've known a couple families where somebody in the family attempted suicide, a younger person in the family, not necessarily a teenager or someone in their 20s, And a lot of the time, the parents, the older generation, would have this dismissive attitude of, oh, they were just doing that for attention. And I tried to put forward the argument as sensitively as possible. If your son wants attention, or if your nephew wants attention, or the person I was talking to, maybe you should give it to them. Like, why are you presuming? Like, I understand the sense in which you're dismissing their suicide attempt as just wanting attention. Now, on the other hand, that does not mean the morally correct thing for you to do now is to refuse to give them attention. Maybe they are craving attention, and maybe this problem will actually be improved if you start paying attention to this person. I have a distant cousin who ended up in a wheelchair for life because of a failed suicide attempt. He threw himself off a roof, and he survived, but was, he had a spine injury and so on for the rest of his life. Sorry to say, these things get discussed. Okay. I think every family, these things come up sooner. Or sort of within your circle of acquaintances, you'll probably know this kind of thing. So I do not think attention-seeking behavior is evil. I think a lot of people perceive what I do on my channel as attention-seeking behavior. I think a very small percentage of what I do on my channel is attention-seeking behavior, but that's fine. I understand. Your channel too. You put a lot of effort into your videos.
Yeah.
Someone can easily say this guy just wants attention. Some percentage of what you're doing here and exhibiting yourself on the internet is what. So I just start with that concession. Now, with that having been said, I noticed when Kasumi Chris showed up at the anti-vegan protest, her first anti-vegan protest, with Spherage, who I think is also known as Gattis. I'm probably getting his name wrong there, but they were eating raw meat in front of vegans at a vegan event, like a vegan festival kind of day, as their public protest, their pro-meat protest against veganism. One of the things she said, she stood there and said in English, "Wow, isn't it amazing? It's getting so much attention." And everything about that moment and her being there and her tone of voice and saying that, I thought, that's what this is all about for you. And, I utterly despise vegetable police. When we were both in Chiang Mai, I offered to meet up with him. I offered to have a boxing match with him. Like a charity boxing match. Nobody would have gotten hurt, would have done it in a gym. And I said, look, why don't we have a boxing match, and whoever wins gets to pick one book that the loser has to read and do a book review video of. That was which I think is a cool boxing match nice. For a loser. Yeah. And, he made pro-Nazi Holocaust-denying videos in the past, which I criticized him for. I thought my criticism was quite mild, but I know my criticism really impacted him. He really felt hurt that I had criticized him for that. Well, are you surprised? But that all of that behavior, it's attention-getting behavior. That guy, he had no sincere interest in the history of World War II. He had no sincere interest in the history of fascism or the Holocaust or anything else. His interest was in getting attention, which is what I said in my criticism of him. What motivates Kasumi Chris? She is lying to herself much more than she's lying to her audience. She claims veganism made her weak. I had the screenshots of her bench pressing and deadlifting, doing these things.
Right.
Yeah, she was bragging, oh, I did my personal squatting record, deadlifting record. She had weightlifting videos as a vegan doing this stuff, So, and now she says when she became vegan, she lost all her muscle tone and, couldn't lift any weight. Well, you yourself produced video evidence. But what motivates that? Fundamentally, it is attention-seeking behavior. So whether you regard that as good or evil is probably irrelevant. I think it's I think it's part of the human condition.
Well, I would say it is what it is, and I know that comes off as tautological in nature, but it is what it is. Like my friends and my subscribers, right? I hang out with them in Discord all the time, and they would tell me how they used to love Vegetable Police's videos way back when because they were original, they were different, it was something to watch. But recently. Well, not recently. He's probably been doing this the entire time, where he would switch up on his diet, and he would say that he's got a problem here, he's got a problem there,
right.
And at the end of it all, he would say, "Oh, this works amazing. This works great. Oh, the other one was wrong. This is
until
right."
Next week's episode. This is the solution for everything. Until next week's episode.
So I made a video that was actually quite controversial. I didn't know it was going to receive this amount of backlash because of because of his nature and the way he was, right? But I told my audience to just leave him alone because I honestly believe the carnivore diet will take a toll on his diet to the point where he will come back to veganism. and that we're just wasting our breath by telling him, hey, you're eating meat, because he's not going to listen to us. He's not going to listen to anybody. He's already made up his mind. He's been in the carnivore diet this long. Like you mentioned, he's been getting the attention that he's been seeking. He's snagged, 60, 70,000 subscribers off YouTube from veganism. A few of them left. But now he's got this entire new audience that he's shifting to. And
Right.
they're giving him the care and attention that he was seeking, like you were mentioning earlier.
Yeah.
As for Kasumi Chris, I think you were spot on when you said she's looking for attention, because she joined veganism in the hopes that she's going to be looking better, which she did. Like a lot of things cleared up for her. She got stronger. She made more friends. I don't know about more friends, but she made a different group of friends.
Yeah.
Right? But then she sees that this other side of veganism, where you have people that are angry and bitter and somewhat depressed, she's going to take things at face value and say to herself, I haven't been feeling that good. Yeah, it's definitely veganism. Let me do a complete 180. Let me not just introduce a little bit of meat and see if that made the difference. Let me just completely throw vegetables and fruit out the window. Let me eat strictly beef. The same with Michaela Peterson. Same with Jordan Peterson. The same with all these other people that are just ditching it completely. It's one thing to feel good, right? And it's another thing to be healthy, right? Because people could probably eat, I mean, you probably disagree with this, right? But people could probably eat 98% of their diet plant-based and then have meat once a year. Really, that one piece
Sure.
of meat probably won't make the biggest difference.
No,
in
ethically,
terms of-
it matters ethically, it matters ecologically,
Right.
but it doesn't matter. No, in terms of your health,
Right.
you can
That's
also.
what
I mean, whiskey is toxic. You can drink whiskey once a year. But yeah, go on. Yeah.
Right. So you get the idea, right? So that's why we have to advocate for the ethics of it. And then they'll turn it around and say, well, ethically, people are mean, and then they turn on you and this and that. The only thing that I have to ask people like Vegetable Police and Kasumi Chris is, and I've like commented on Three Ridges videos and all the other carnivore dieters. I always comment on their videos because it's just so much fun to mess with them. Frank Tufano, sorry, we call him Frank Tufink.
Yeah.
He sits there and he tells you about these anti-nutrients and whatnot. So one thing I always ask them is, why aren't the longest living populations on this planet on the carnivore diet?
Yeah.
Not why are they not vegan, right? The vegan thing is out the picture. If you're advocating for a strictly meat and animal-based diet, why aren't the living longest populations on these diets?
Right.
Where's the evidence?
Yeah.
You
No,
see what I'm coming at?
and historically, everyone knows about the example of the Inuit, but the other big example really is Mongolia. And I have done some research on the history of Mongolia. Mongolia did not have a 100% meat diet, but it was a predominantly meat diet with very little green vegetables or fruit in it. Meat and porridge. Meat and porridge diet. And, it was nearly 100% obesity rate. And, people could live a pretty robust life on that diet till about age 30.
So,
Your health is falling
there you
apart.
go.
Yeah. And it is what it is. I was just talking to someone yesterday who had cholesterol problems already at age 12, and she's now on a vegan diet. But she was being diagnosed with cholesterol-caused health problems I think at 12 and 14 and stuff like that. So yeah. I mean, the games you play with your health are real, but I mean, again. It's funny because sometimes these things are phrased in terms of optimal health, like how can you win at the Olympics? That's a question the vast majority of humanity doesn't need to answer. Like, I really don't care if the 0.00, because they're using steroids. I mean, they're using all kinds of things that the most people shouldn't use. So the one question is optimal health that skews the conversation one way. And then the other question is, what can you get away with? What can you scrape by on? And sure, I mean, most of us, our own grandparents scraped by on meat and potatoes and whiskey and cigarettes. And we saw how they lived. I mean, maybe you're the exception watching this video and your grandparents were vegan yoga instructors. Let me tell you, most of us, we have relatives from the older generation of our family who showed you what that kind of, unhealthy diet is like. But they didn't drop dead at 35. I mean, they dropped dead whenever they dropped dead. They lived reasonable lives, and you had those expectations. I've mentioned this before on my channel. I said before, I didn't expect to look like this at age 40. What a 40-year-old male in my family looked like. and their ability to walk up a staircase was much, much lower. I mean, they were pretty disabled people by 40. That was what was normal in my, well, no, it was normal in my family. People were just basically kind of fat and unathletic, and, whether they were smokers or ex-smokers or whatever. I mean, it was the meat, and sorry, I've mentioned before also in the south of France, people always grossly underestimate my age. They think I'm way younger than I am. And that's because which I don't think I look youthful, but I don't look like I'm dying.
To show their expectation of life.
That's right. That's what they think. I mean, so when I had my daughter, I mean, people thought I was like a teen dad. And when I challenged them, because I speak some French, I'd say to them, sorry, how old do you think I am? And they'd stop and think about it, and they'd be like, "What are you, like 22?" Like they'd realize I was offended that they thought I was a teenager, and then they'd, okay, sorry, you're in your early 20s. No, I'm in my late 30s. I'm now 40. So it is what it is. But I mean, ultimately, all of this, we've already said it in this conversation earlier. Ultimately, this is about taking responsibility for the consequences of your actions. So I don't care if you can either be an Olympic athlete who eats meat, or if you can just scrape by, as my own grandparents did, and eat meat. Of course that's true. I'm asking you to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. I'm asking you to take responsibility for your actions ecologically, and in terms of the fact that right now there are literally billions of animals in a steel shed, on a concrete floor, in a cage, never seeing the sunlight and waiting to die. I mean, this is just, it's inexcusable, so let's all stop making excuses for it.
So I know this is going to sound like a stupid question because you basically answered it with your last statement there, but do you think the social pressures that first of all, do you think that there are social pressures that people like Vegetable Police and Kasumi Chris are going through? And if so, is that enough for them to stop being vegan?
Okay.
I know it's a stupid question.
Look, okay, I have met women who felt they were ugly because their sister was better looking than them. As life goes on, you watching this video may not have been in the situation. It will probably happen to you at some point in your life. You meet a woman who's really insecure about her looks and is really hung up on her looks, and you just kind of don't get it. You wonder why. And then you meet her sister, or you see a family photo of her and her family all together, and then all of a sudden, you get it. The point is, she never feels that she can be good looking enough because she's comparing herself to her own sister. And I've known families like that intellectually also, where, the parents of the family are surgeons and the kid always feels stupid and like they haven't accomplished enough compared to their own parents or compared to their older brother. So there is a question for most human beings of what standards they may be consciously or unconsciously setting for their own accomplishments. Vegetable Police is very stupid, and he's very ugly. And he lives in a world where, tragically, I don't say this without sympathy. It's easy for me to sympathize with him. He compares himself to the brotherhood of people on YouTube, the brotherhood of people on Instagram, and especially his little demi-monde, the brotherhood of people in Chiang Mai, Thailand, making money out of YouTube and Instagram who were vegan. Right? That was the category he put himself into. And he's the ugliest and he's the stupidest of them all. And he doesn't speak Thai, and he can't learn how to speak Thai, and he can't really do much of anything with his brain. He doesn't really have anything to say. This is a medium that's very much based on being a good talker. He's not really that eloquent or smart or charming or sharp or witty. And he's ugly. All right? And he wants to. I mean, we've seen this for years. He wants to develop big muscles to compensate. He wants to be... He can't do it. I mean, he's tried his hardest with, exercise and calisthenics and so on. So that's really a tragedy that he's trying to act out as a comedy. And it is, in the strictest sense, it's pathetic. Now, Kasumi Chris, I wouldn't call her ugly, but she does have a really terrible problem with acne. And, she's finally been putting up pictures of what she looks like when she has the eye. So I'm sure she feels especially ashamed of her looks. It's really, really serious, extreme acne. And again, I sympathize, but, So she struggles with acne. She struggles with feeling ugly. And again, she looks at her competition. She looks at her brothers and sisters on YouTube and Instagram, and she feels a lot of inferiority. So that's the struggle. I mean, that's the struggle psychologically. And for those people, these two you mentioned, I think for thousands of others, of the most visible people in the vegan movement and most visible people on Instagram and YouTube generally, that's the kind of psychology they bring to it. That's the kind of competition or struggle they're in. And the struggle is not to save the planet. The struggle is not to lobby government for social change. I mean, it's not. That's not how they see themselves, right? And one other one to mention. Let's just do a little bit more of a sympathetic example. So Henya of Henya Mania, she started out being someone like your friend Maria. Henya started out being a really firebrand street protest, street theater activist kind of person, and she obviously struggles with her weight, struggles with her looks. She was born with a condition where she has really terrible teeth. She's talked about that. She was born with some kind of digestive disorder. She has a long history of psychiatric problems and getting on various antidepressants. She has all these problems, and she comes on YouTube, and she feels like she's suddenly in a competition for who's the prettiest and who's the smartest. And she seemed to completely lose her moral compass and sense of purpose in terms of vegan activism, which in her case she did have at the beginning. She was a legitimate activist at the start. And by the end of it, she's just another vapid, two-dimensional plastic, kind of aspiring beauty icon, permanent vacation, Instagram model figure. So there's a range of these things. But yeah, that's my psychological rather than political analysis of what's going on there. It's hard to get attention, and Vegetable Police is a guy who will even temporarily become a neo-Nazi to get attention.
Yeah, even as a joke, right? Even as a joke, like even if he wants to poke fun at it and whatnot, if it gains some sort of attention, media attention, why not, right?
That's who he is.
I can understand the motives, but I don't necessarily.
It's despicable. It's despicable. Yeah, right.
Because how low can you go? I guess that's the.
That is how low you can go. I don't know why you didn't do the boxing match with me. I don't think that's nearly as low. What the hell? I mean, who cares? Yeah.
Anyway. Somebody challenged him to a push-up contest recently.
Oh, yeah.
I forgot who it was. Somebody linked it. Banana guy, Banana Ram. I don't know the guy's name, but he challenged him to a push-up contest, and in true Vegetable Police fashion, he denied, or he said that
he
this guy didn't do as much push-up. Yeah, of course. That's fine. We're used to it at this point, right? So the next thing I wanted to bring up with the carnivore dieters, I'm getting this sense. Now, I am not negative in any way when it comes to people that eat meat. I understand where they're coming from. I disagree completely, but I have to sympathize in the sense that I used to be in that same position not too long ago. And even 10 years from now, I'm still going to look at them and be like, you know what? You're not educated. That's fine. Take your time. If I've presented all the facts, if I've shown you all the evidence, if I've convinced you ethically and yet you still continue to do it, then we might have a problem. But if you're like my siblings or, like my family, and they sit there and they tell me, I don't care, I just love the taste, I'm not even going to bother arguing. You cannot change a stubborn person's mind. So I'm not even going to bother. I've presented them with everything, and at the end of the day, they're going to hit you with, I don't care. That's fine. I'm not going to argue with you. I'm going to go move on to somebody else that's reasonable, that's open to discussion, and that wants to make a difference. Now, with the carnivore dieters, the issue that I have is that vegans are painting this brush with the us versus them mentality, or so that's what it seems like. And I don't like that at all, because at the end of the day, they're still human beings. Yes, they're committing terrible atrocities. Yes, they're doing these horrible things, but people can change, right? And they just need to be shown, hey, look, what you're doing is not only unhealthy, what you're doing is not only damaging the environment and ecology, as you mentioned in many of your videos, but ethically. How can you go to sleep at night knowing that you have a pet dog, but you're eating the cow? When is it going to click in your mind that this thing is not only wrong ethically, but just hypocritical in nature?
Well, I already gave you my example from the tourist in Africa when somebody standing right next to him got shot in the head. So, I don't know. I mean, it is what it is. But look, why do we object to someone wearing a T-shirt that approves of the Nazi Party, a T-shirt that promotes, Adolf Hitler? The T-shirt itself does not directly harm or kill anyone. However, we do really have a problem where dangerous ideas influence people, especially weak people. Obviously, the way religious groups and cults prey on the weak, the way extreme political groups, including neo-Nazis, prey on and recruit the weak, and so on. There's a reason why we stand up and say, no, this is despicable, and you can't wear this T-shirt. The T-shirt isn't intrinsically evil, but there is a lot of extrinsic danger built into the situation. I do think that it's fair to say the misinformation being spread by the carnivore people, the pro-carnivore people like Michaelia Peterson, it is dangerous. It is a negative influence. It harms people. Now, to give a comparison, what if I, was promoting a diet that involved people drinking small quantities of really harmful metals like lead, and mercury? Right. I wish this were a hypothetical example. It's not. That's done in Indian yoga groups where they believe you should drink all these various magical metals, including gold and what have you also. Let them go through your system. It's an old medieval superstition. So there is some stuff out there like that. What if, we have a form of Christianity where people believe in being bitten by poisonous snakes? Those ideas are out there. And, I'm not directly disagreeing with what you say, but I am delimiting it, which is, no, it's really harmful. And if people were spreading the message that it was okay to huff glue, that smelling glue fumes did no brain damage, we'd be out there saying, no, we have to, partly for ethical reasons, we can't have people spreading this kind of misinformation. We have to draw a line. And, I think that in that sense, the stakes are low. I don't think anyone really feels a sense of urgency about refuting Michaelia Peterson. But I think it does fall into that category where there is a real conflict with real consequences.
So how do you feel about the separation between these two groups then? I know that we have things like in politics where you have the Republicans versus the Democrats, you have neo-Nazis versus basically every human being on planet Earth. You have a lot of separation here. And the one thing that I'm trying to get at is, why is there so much hate on both sides? Now, we keep saying that we're right, and they keep saying that they're right. Now, of course, I'm going to side with us because I've looked at the research, I've seen the damage. I don't feel particularly comfortable with eating that stuff anymore. But how do I know that they're not right?
Okay, so you asked two different questions. One was about the nature of the conflict. But look, I think the conflict, this is sort of the first half of your question, I think it's just created for entertainment value. I think that's all that's happening there. And okay. a lot of things on the internet are like that. Veganism is a sincere movement. It may be a failure as a movement. It may be a very small movement, but it's a sincere movement. And the carnism thing, the pro-meat eating thing, it is not a sincere movement. On the one hand, you're talking about some severely mentally broken people. Michaelia Peterson lists off these mental problems that are pretty serious. And then her conclusion was to put herself on an all-meat diet. Okay, so this is someone who's basically testifying to how insane she is. Now, let's be honest, Durian Ryder did the same. Durian Ryder listed off that he had been diagnosed with schizophrenia and other serious mental illnesses. He also claimed that he had miraculously cured these conditions by eating bananas. Just recently, Durian Ryder said in court under oath that he has brain damage. We don't know how serious the brain damage is. It's presumably from the same car accident he talked about. We don't know that. He didn't state. But, okay, so this is someone with brain. So, and indeed, Durian Ryder was not a suitable leader for the vegan movement. So you got a lot of, mentally broken people. But, the sincerity of veganism as a movement gives it depth and longevity. And, no, I don't think Michaelia Peterson really represents a counter movement, nor does Spherage or what have you. Look, sorry, but just one more thing. The only thing I was going to say is, what we are looking for at this stage in 2018 is talent. Vegans are trying to recruit talented people. Now, it's true to some extent there's also a financial challenge. Like, yeah, it would also be great if we could have more donors or more money supporting the talent that's there. But it's really talent that's scarce, not money, in 2018. So I don't really think there's a conflict inevitable, just in the sense that I don't look at Michaelia Peterson as talent. I'm not trying to recruit her to our side. You know, even if something as simple as making documentary films to support veganism or something, you start looking around and saying, okay, I'm looking for talent to accomplish this. I'm looking to lobby City Hall or State Congress or Parliament. The kind of talent you're hoping for, I just don't think we're looking at the same talent pools. And on the other side, you have people, you know, like guys who are just kind of fad diet bodybuilders on the meat eating side. There's an asymmetry here in the nature of what's going on in terms of motivations, methods, means, and outcomes. Yeah.
What about the I don't want to use this
word.
I know
one more thing. Does anyone donate money? Does anyone donate money to Michaela Peterson? You see, that's another important difference. I don't think she's running a foundation like PETA or something. I don't think. You see what I mean?
I don't think so. Yeah.
So that's also a difference. Now, anything I do for veganism, ultimately, I got to worry about donations and support and what have you. And those guys don't. That's not the game they're playing. So that's another little hint as to how asymmetrical they are. Yeah.
So I was gonna say, like, I didn't want to say this, right? I think you're right about that. But again, I don't like to use this word, but it almost seems like there's this cult-like mentality with the carnivore dieters, and it's like, I don't know. I don't even like to use the R word. You know, or I just say mentally ill, mentally challenged.
I was thinking rape, but okay, go on. Yeah.
So Three Ridge talks about how like 99% of the world have mental problems, and it's just like I watch his videos for entertainment because it's just like so much fun to listen to somebody go super crazy about these ideas, and to sit there and think like, dude, you're actually. It's not harmful what you're saying to me because I know you're a crazy guy. What's harmful is the people listening to you and joining your cause.
Right.
That's the harm that I'm seeing. Like, how are these people seriously going to sit there and believe what this guy's saying? You know? And the one video that I admired a lot from you, oh my goodness, thank you for posting it, was the hypocrite versus Hippocratic oath.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Yeah. He was talking about how much he doesn't like doctors and how they're after our money. His girlfriend gets beat up, and now he's asking for money to go to the doctor.
Right.
Like, okay, buddy.
Right.
You know, okay, yeah, sure. And we've seen this countless times. He also ran out of funds from YouTube and started asking his Patreon supporters, his YouTube subscribers, to give him money to sustain the diet. Well, maybe that diet isn't sustainable. So, again, the thing that's scary about him isn't the fact that he's promoting this, but the fact that people are following his advice really scares me. So it's turning into somewhat of a cult, and I don't like to use that word because people in cults follow their leaders blindly, and with all conviction that they have. And in a sense, you see that from people in the vegan movement like Rato 4 or the breatharians and whatnot. Right. And I think Timothy Sheaf was like that for a little bit.
So look, I assume you don't have any kids. Do you have kids?
No.
Okay.
No.
Well, so hypothetically, in the future, let's say you have an 18-year-old son, and you'll see this applies pretty easily to 28 and 38 without much difference. Say you have an 18-year-old son, and he starts a YouTube channel or a website in the future. And all of a sudden, he's got just $500 a month coming in. And let's say just 5 women a month write to him, interested in having sex with him. Like, not flat-out offers, but women writing and say, hey, you know, are you ever coming to Chicago? I'd really like to meet up with you, and here's a picture of me. Okay?
Right.
The vast majority of 18-year-old males will go, in blunt language, ape shit. They will not have the fortitude, self-discipline, and detachment to deal with that very well. And it doesn't have to be a lot of fame or a lot of success. If just 5 women are trying to sleep with you, you know, that's infinitely more than 0, and you got options. And all of a sudden there's the possibility of going to Chicago. That goes to most. Now, I'm a really weird person. It doesn't go to my head, and I have had, frankly, not lately, but I've had periods of my channel where, some money was coming in, and significant attention of the opposite sex comes in, and I mean, I'm a very cynical, world-weary person who looks at that in a certain kind of analytical way. But whether it's 18, 28, 38, that's going to have some of the features from an outsider's perspective that a cult has, you see. So that's actually my warning here, is it's not so much that I'm coming down strongly and saying, no, this is not a cult. I'm pointing out that this is similar to a cult in ways that I think are ultimately misleading. That's my suggestion. And now look, it doesn't even mean it's good. If that were your son, I mean, actually, you can think about it. What is more scary? If your son at 18 joins a cult group, or if your son is in that position at 18 of suddenly having that kind of money and temptation coming in, both are dangerous. Both, I think, would be very concerning to a parent.
That's a fair assessment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree.
I think one of the differences, I had at least one video where I think this was even in the title. I used to talk about the self-directed cult. I know I have a written article that's called Robert J. Lifton and the Self-Directed Cult. We're talking about self-directed cult. Mm-hmm. And one of the differences is the 18-year-old with the hit YouTube channel. Nobody's in charge. There's nobody he answers to above him, right? And I think that would be true of most of these groups also, even though they may seem very cult-like. So it has this strange, decentralized, self-directed quality. And I would say, something like the passionate following Freely used to have. It was all people sitting at their own computers, convincing themselves that this stuff must be true. And so it lacked the leadership and followership evidence of most real-world cults.
Okay, and I think I want to end on that topic. I think again we covered pretty good stuff. The next thing. Perfect transition to our next topic. Mental and physical health issues among vegans. It's because this cult-like mentality doesn't just come, like on your lap. It doesn't come in front of you. It's something that's probably built up over time. Brainwashings, feeling negative from your parents, the way they treat you, the way they raise you. These kind of issues arise, and they don't just come overnight. And some of that has to do with mental and physical issues, not just among vegans, but among all people, to get them to that point. So we've seen it a lot. Vegan Gains has been open about it. He mentioned how he used to be an angry person. Yeah. He's saying how veganism has helped. But according to basically anybody that watches his videos, they still see him as an angry person. Isaac from Ask Yourself, he's mentioned it himself as well. Not that he's a particularly angry person, but there are things in life that get him angry, and he just really can't deal with it. If I were to give another example of vegan that has gone through issues, I'm just putting out the mainstream guys out there, right?
Sure.
You said Durian Ryder, he's diagnosed with schizophrenia.
He claims he is. Yeah, that also could be a lie, but yeah, right. He claims it. Yeah.
Now, I have to say this. I have to say that I don't even believe that the vegan diet, as long as it's whole food, plant-based, good quality sources of vitamins and minerals, I don't believe that those kinds of diets inherently cause the mental health issues or physical health issues. But we see a lot of people saying that they're vegan for ethical reasons and then developing mental and health issues. One, for their diet, and two, because of their contempt for people that eat meat. And we see it all the time where that sort of rage, that sort of passion that they have goes out of control, and they start yelling things to people like, you're retarded. I hate that word. When they say you're retarded, when they say you're a murderer, when they say, and it's all justified. Yeah. It completely makes sense. They're absolutely right. But it needs to be redirected or brought back in because it's not healthy for them to express themselves in this sort of way.
I think it'd be fair to say it's pathetic. I mean, the word pathetic has kind of a double meaning. There's pathos there, but it is pathetic to be screaming at someone that they're retarded and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't like the name calling thing at all. I don't think this is going to help the vegan movement whatsoever. You can say what you want about Unnatural Vegan and the way she looks and the way she raises her kids, but like you mentioned in your video, calling her a dumb bitch isn't going to do much for you or for anybody that's vegan. Right. And this thing sort of escalates. And the thing is, with
she calls me a cult leader. Go on.
So yeah, I have no idea where she got that from. Not clue. She's got. I don't understand.
I don't think she can back it up, but anyway, go on. Yeah. Well, I think that's a totally self-contained statement you made. I don't have anything to say in response to it. I guess what I would ask you is, do you really think rage is the outstanding problem? Because you mostly talked about rage there. I don't know if rage is the main
rage is
problem.
not, but we have a lot of. I don't want to say a lot of vegans. There's really no evidence, but from what it seems, there seems like these vegans develop depression as one of the main sources. And I want to say it's not because of the food, right? Even though there are causes like saturated fat and vegan pizzas and vegan hamburgers. Like if you eat high amounts of processed food, it's definitely going to lead to depression and lower energy levels. But the fact that you're surrounding yourself with people that talk down to meat eaters, don't you think that if you're around that sort of environment, maybe it's not the healthiest for your mind to be in? And the fact that 98% of the world eats meat, right? So you're already limiting yourself to a group of people that aren't going to be next to you, for one. That's why we have Discord. And number two, you don't even have the options to go out and eat vegan. Not many options, right? Like unless you live in LA, what else? Seattle, Oregon, Atlanta, New York City. Like unless you live in these big cities where they offer you these options, you as an individual, you've secluded yourself from an environment where you could have made potentially a lot more friends simply because of the culture that you live in. Whereas now you're in veganism, where it's been reduced significantly. And you will find friends, but are these people really going to be helping you out with those mental issues?
Well, look, so you asked first about kind of rage, and now you're talking about friendship and isolation. I'm kind of going to answer with something that's related to both, but it may not be obvious to you how, which is talk about hatred. And I think a lot of people, not just in Western culture, are in denial about the extent to which they hate, and I use the word hate quite intentionally. A lot of people are in denial about the extent to which they hate the culture they happen to have been born into. And you didn't choose that culture. Now, again, depending on how well-traveled you are, what if I had been born in Italy? What if I had been born in Egypt? What if I had been born in Saudi Arabia? But even closer to home, what if I had been born and raised in Georgia? We just got back from Detroit. And, there are a lot of things I would really, really hate about Detroit, about spending any length of time there. And, some people, I'm very cerebral about this. I'm aware of the contrast between myself and Canadian culture. I'm aware of the few things that I positively value about it. I'm aware of the gaps and differences and the sources of friction and hatred or whatever. And I can try to manage that in a kind of intellectually sophisticated way. I try to have a productive, positive life despite that. People who are not aware of it, or people who are suppressing it, denying it, people who are pretending that they're happy, driving an hour back and forth to work in traffic and coming home to eat meat and play with their dog and watch football on television and, get deep fried chicken wings from KFC. People who are conforming to the culture they're a part of, and who may even be trying to ignore the extent to which their lives are mediocre or bleak and awful within that culture. That creates a lot of hatred, a lot of resentment, a lot of dysphoria, to use a fashionable word. Now, obviously, if you then regard that society as, deeply immoral, for any of these reasons, it doesn't have to be, veganism. Veganism is one reason. I regard a lot of the things people do in the decadent West as immoral. I just can't believe people spend their lives this way. I think that the whole saga of what happened with antidepressants, and you were asking about depression, I think the whole, pseudoscientific marketing hype saga of what happened with millions of people, badly damaging their brain chemistry with this drug, I think that's a really sad story too. And you look at your own culture and society very differently when you know about that. You look at the medical establishment differently, so on and so forth. So that's what I would say, broadly speaking, is you have, I think, a lot of vegans. I mean, how different would my experience of veganism be if I really loved the city I was born and raised in?
Of course.
It's hard for me to even imagine that, you know? So alienation from your home culture or your host culture, the culture you're raised in, the culture you're living in hatred for at least some elements of that culture. Like, I don't play ice hockey. I don't watch ice hockey. I don't go skiing. The things that my culture celebrates are a joke to me. And I look around at my culture being built on genocide and colonialism and imperialism, and, there are all these terrible things in my culture that really bother me. I also am really bothered by people eating, dismembered animal corpses every day. But it's, it's not the only point of alienation. So, yeah, it's very hard for most people to look at that in a detached way. Again, last, year and a half, 2 years, my girlfriend has become quite cosmopolitan. She now knows how different life is in France and how different it is in China. And that, again, gives her a different kind of, insight into the extent to which being raised in Detroit and rebelling against elements of the culture she was raised in, elements that most people don't question, that's part of it. So that's what I think is the underlying dynamic there. And yeah, vegans are not going to be the only aspiring social movement to have this, this kind of dynamic.
One of the reasons I bring it up, right, again, I have to reiterate the fact that I studied criminal justice.
Oh, right.
One thing that always comes up in the discussion is suicide rates and gun ownership, right? And I believe the most recent statistic that we found was that 40% of people that own pistols use it for suicide. That's scary. Wow. That is scary, right? So more importantly, like, why are they, like you say, why are they using it for suicide? Well, I think the more important question to ask is, why are 40% of people killing themselves? Okay, maybe they have some sort of
attempting suicide. I'm guessing that's suicide attempts, but yeah. Go on. Yeah.
But you have people that, more importantly, people are depressed. Depression is rising, and it's in a place where it shouldn't be rising, because you would think you have all these things, you have all the access to basically all the freedoms. Not all, right? I'm using that loosely.
Right.
You get what I'm saying? You have cars, you have jobs, you have money, you have things. You're not restricted on the internet. You could say whatever you want with limited repercussion or consequences. So the fact that the suicide rate and depression rates are going up higher, it pains me to know that something like veganism might contribute to it even more, or make it worse, exacerbate it. And that's not only due to the nature of the movement itself, but it could be because of the poor lifestyle and poor habits, because people are bought by the idea, hey, look, the evidence shows that veganism is the longest way to live. Right. Veganism is the most ethical thing. You're given all these great things about such a great movement, and at the end of it, you say to yourself, well, I can still eat potato chips. Oh, I'm vegan. Oh, I can still drink alcohol. I'm vegan. Right. Oh, I can sit on the couch all day. I'm vegan. They get, like, some people get the idea that they truly are better, and they get the superiority complex that they can literally do anything they want as long as it doesn't infringe on the freedoms and rights of other people or animals.
So, look, I actually disagree with you here, and maybe I'll convince you, but this is a rare case where I get to disagree with you. I think what people have a scarcity of is meaning in life. Now, you're right. There are a lot of things we don't have a scarcity of. There's an advertisement on this table. You can't see it. It's off camera. There's an advertisement for the Nintendo video game series Metroid. Now, I could take any example of, Mickey Mouse, or, there's so many things in our culture that are ultimately really hollow and meaningless. But, the Metroid video games have been around since I was a child. And it's the same plot every time. You're a person in robot armor who shoots space aliens. There's no meaning. There's no storyline. It's very repetitive.
Right.
And I think any one of those games is at least 20 hours to play through. Probably most people, probably each game they play for 40 hours, 60 hours. Obviously not in one sitting, but it's not like a movie. A movie you maybe watch for an hour and a half. So people grow up spending all of these hours on Metroid. And they spend all of these hours on, a lot of meaningless pop culture stuff. And, I do think it's fair to call those things meaningless. And I think they come out of that with a real appetite for something meaningful. So one of the artistic challenges I'm really interested in is producing children's storybooks that are more meaningful than what's available right now. So, what songs do we sing to our children? The farmer in the dell, the farmer in the dell, hi-ho the dairy-o, the farmer in the dell. The actual songs we have to sing to our children, the stories we tell our children, which includes, Metroid, includes video games. They are so meaningless, it's painful. And we grow up with those as the only meaning in our life that we can clutch at and cling to. And again, my response to this, I was aware of this. I was cerebrally aware of this. And I chose to convert to Buddhism and become a scholar of Buddhism. I was trying to do something constructive. I was trying to become a part of a culture, that I valued and could do something positive with. And, Buddhism is better than communism, which is basically my parents' religion that I was raised with was communism. So it was a step in the right direction. But still, Buddhism is far from perfect and had its own problems. But, so that yearning for meaning and reaching out for meaning and not knowing how to make it yourself. You can't just replace Metroid with something more meaningful. You probably can't. You can't just program your own video game. You could. Most of you probably can't. You can't. Again, you can't. Most people can't just write a new storybook for their children. I'm really going to try. I have about 30 days now, and I'm really trying to prepare a series of stories and puppet shows and activities for my daughter for the next time I see her, because I want them to be about something. I want them to be meaningful, more meaningful than Curious George. Another very un-vegan storybook, Curious George. Anyway, so I think that's the challenge and that's the scarcity. So I don't see it in the same terms you do. And you were lamenting that veganism leads to further isolation. Well, no, because veganism can exactly be a step from a meaningless life to a meaningful life. And moreover, veganism for many people is a step away from meaningless forms of rebellion. Rebellion against the culture you were born into. A lot of people, they're upset with the culture they're in, so they start wearing a leather jacket. They start having a mohawk, the hairstyle mohawk. They start dyeing their hair funny. Goes. There are many forms of rebellion that are meaningless and self-defeating. And what's the point? I do think that veganism is an act of rebellion. It's a refusal to conform and comply with cultural expectations. But I think it's a meaningful one. I think it does bring meaning into a lot of people's lives. There is pathos in that struggle. And there's tragedy in it. But, there's also tragedy in people spending 40 hours playing Metroid. Trying to see the good ending. That's also a feature of those games. Beating it repeatedly so you can see the good ending and not the bad ending. And that is mass. That is epidemic. Most people have nothing but Walt Disney, Nintendo's Metroid, the Friday night sports game on TV. That's all they've got. And I am completely confident in saying veganism is better than that, despite everything that's wrong with veganism. And it's not easy for me to say that about Buddhism. It's not, because Buddhism, it's much more difficult to have something positive come into Buddhism. Good.
I didn't think of it that way. When you brought up the concept of meaning, it definitely got me thinking for a little bit. I'm like, you know what? I'd rather be alone and fight for something that I can stand for than be with a million people that stand for nothing. So in that context, I can see where you're coming from.
Well, okay, that's a good image, but let's just put it this way. I could buy tickets to go to an ice hockey game or go to a football game. I'll be standing in a crowd, but I will be alone in that crowd.
Yes.
And now, when I fly to Europe, we're going to both France and Germany, and I'll let people know on social media so they can meet me. Maybe I'm going to meet with 2 or 3 vegan activists in Europe. Maybe just one. There's one I know we've already lined up. But I have something meaningful in common with them. Hey, maybe it's going to be 10 or 15 people. But, I'm not going to be alone with those people, so to speak.
Right.
See? So that's...
I get it. Big difference.
Meaning can lead to togetherness. And, it might not. You might remember, you might not, the vegan woman who tried to kill a bunch of people at YouTube headquarters.
Oh yeah, the
Right.
I don't know where she was from, Pakistan or something.
Yeah.
I remember the girl. Yeah.
Yeah, so she decided to try. I think she only shot a couple of people, but she was trying to murder a large number of people and then
Right.
commit suicide. It was this kind of event. So she had never had a boyfriend. She was a virgin until the day she died. She felt she never fit into American culture. She was very unhappy with it. Religiously, her family were Baha'i, as I recall, Baha'ism, a relatively small religion. There was a lot of alienation there, and she never overcame her accent. She spoke English with a thick accent, despite living in America basically her whole life that she could remember. I think as a very small child, she was outside of America, but so yeah, there's an example of someone. I think veganism was the only meaningful thing she had in her life, and it wasn't enough. It's not enough. She needed a boyfriend. I mean, she needed whatever. She needed all kinds of other things. She probably needed a career and education and stuff too. I'm sorry, I'm not judging. I'm just assuming there were other things in her life that weren't so rewarding. That led her to this point of desperation and misery. But I don't look at that and say, okay, veganism was the problem here. I think probably veganism was the only thing that was any good in what was really a very bleak, miserable, depressing life for her. Yeah.
Some people would
Sure.
disagree. I do not. But that's probably because they're not presented with all the evidence. They haven't been exposed to a vegan lifestyle. They don't know that it is a different world in some sense, where when you walk into a grocery store,
Yeah.
you're always passing the meat aisle, and you don't think about food anymore. You think like, wow, I can't believe this
Yeah.
goes on for another 30 feet, So, like,
Yep.
it's a scary thing. And not only that, but this is just one store of hundreds
Right.
of thousands of stores in one state, of 50 states, of 200 countries. Like, you start thinking in those terms and you say to yourself, wow, I can't believe this is still going on and that nobody's realizing it. So for them to have that thing to not contribute to, and to say to themselves, no, I have more discipline, I have more willpower than to eat something that tastes good, it speaks a lot to them. And again, like you said, it gives them meaning for life. It says, hey, you're not doing this for you.
Yeah.
It's for the animals. It's for the ecology, and
Yep.
it's for basically those that,
Yep.
So, I mean,
And some people experience that as tragedy. I mean, for some people, it's tragic. I've broken down weeping on this YouTube channel at least 4 times. I don't have a count. There are tragic elements to my involvement with veganism. My girlfriend hears it more than anyone, but, there are things I really regret. There are really sources of sadness and sorrow and setbacks in my life that have come out of my involvement in veganism. And for some people, there's going to be a lot more tragedy than comedy. But it's also true. I mean, who even talks to me today? The friends I have, the meaningful relationships I have mostly been brought into my life through veganism. Right. And look, I mean, sorry, I don't even know how old you are. And sorry, I can't
25.
tell. Oh, you're 25. But I was going to say, it's possible you and I will still know each other 10 years from now.
It's very possible.
Remember, I mean, again, like, in terms of being alone in the crowd or whatever. I mean, I'm busy the next couple of months, but whatever. I'm just saying, this also can be the start of a friendship or colleagueship or what have you. And, if I had done a video game YouTube channel, I'm certain I'd have more viewers. If I'd done a Game of Thrones YouTube channel, I'd have more viewers. But I don't know if I'd have more meaningful friendships. It's an open question. So, yeah, there are ways in which I still kind of have to insist that veganism is objectively a good thing, even though subjectively you may experience more tragedy than comedy from it.
I do experience more tragedy simply because I'm presented with the reality of the situation. And I honestly, if it wasn't for veganism, I don't think I would have finally made that leap of maturity that I have now. Now, if my friends are watching these videos, right, they would say, oh, Willie, you're a crazy guy, this and that. But honestly, if it wasn't for veganism, I don't think that I would have stopped watching professional football. If it wasn't for veganism. Yeah, like...
I think that's a really interesting sample. Go on, yeah.
I'm sorry, it's just, like, things began to change, and you could call it maturity, you could call it veganism, you can point it at anything, but at a certain point in time, I look at my brothers, I look at my friends, and I'm like, what are you guys doing? they make fun of me. Here's a funny example. They make fun of me because we go to an annual vacation. Everybody works, but at least 1 week of the year, we all meet up together, 7, 8, or 9 of us, and we go to the beach, and have fun together. And they were making fun of me, but in a good way, because they saw me doing yoga first thing in the morning. And I think we were in Miami, and I had my phone on. And as I was doing yoga, I was listening to a debate between I Hypocrite and I Ask Yourself. And they're like, hey, man, what are you doing listening to podcasts? I'm like looking at them. I'm like, what are you doing watching Game of Thrones? I hate Game of Thrones. I can't get into it. I'm sorry. It's boring to me. I'm sorry. Even if I were into that, I just think it's boring. But they're making fun of me for doing yoga, listening to podcasts. And then they say, dude, are you 50 years old?
Right.
And at that moment, I'm like,
are you 16? Right.
The questions are asked. Am I more mature? Are you too young? Am I supposed to be young? Are you supposed to grow up? Am I hanging out with the right people?
Right.
Is ultimately what it came down to. And I realized, no, I wasn't. These people are not on the same intellectual level. I'm not saying I'm a smart person, but the things that we discuss, I get tired of it, because what ends up happening is you go to a party. You say, hey, Josh, what's going on, man? And he's like, oh, nothing much. How you been? Oh, I'm good. How's work? Work is good. What about you? Oh, work is good too. Awkward silence, awkward pause. All right, man, it's good seeing you. And that's the end of it, because we don't have anything in common. Right. Even if we were to talk about football and Julio Jones catching a touchdown, what does that do for us as people?
Yeah.
That does nothing for me. I'd rather talk to somebody across the entire country, right, in another country, that I have a common theme with.
Yep.
And you see what I'm getting at?
So, Sure. I mean, the other thing that's interesting with veganism is there is actually a positive objective for the future. And I just mentioned that's often lacking in Buddhism. It could exist within a particular, Buddhist movement. But okay, even if it's 300 years from now, we want to live in a world that isn't built on the perpetual exploitation of animals, factory farming, et cetera, et cetera. We have this end point, and we have to work towards it. It's not something that's going to happen without anyone lifting a finger, right? So, I mean, that also gives those friendships dynamism, even if it's dynamism in the midst of a feeling of powerlessness and hopelessness. Because I know, just due to poverty and what have you, a lot of people feel they can't do anything more for the movement, than they're already doing, or they can't do anything at all. So yeah, I do think veganism is a gateway to more meaningful friendships. And look, in some ways I'm in the opposite category from you, and in some ways I'm in the same category. So I'm a very gregarious person. I'm very good at talking. Thus I have 1,000 YouTube videos, but I am in real life also. I don't need a camera. Yeah. So I can go to parties and I can really talk. And I think people don't want to invite me to parties because it makes them feel stupid, and it makes them feel
uncomfortable.
It makes them feel like they have nothing to say. Because for me, even when I'm speaking very casually, like I'm not talking about veganism or politics or something, people really do pick up on the depth of what I'm able to do and how easy it is for me to kind of win in a contest. People pick up on that, So it's interesting. You can be a good talker and be a person of substance who people still don't want at that party. And they don't want to feel stupid, and they don't want to feel judged, and what have you. So there's also a kind of self-selecting, stupidity. And here in Canada, white English-speaking Canada, most people don't make new friends after the end of high school. They want to just stay in a circle of people who kind of don't question them and don't judge them and don't get out of that comfort zone. Yeah. Anyway, and I've seen contrasting cultures, all over the world. In China, people do become friends with you, but friendship in China is almost always linked to business. So friends are a hybrid of friend and colleague. Which is very different from Western culture. We think of those as very separate. So, even I was talking actually with an Arab friend. I don't know. I guess a Palestinian, for lack of a better category. Friend.
There's two of us.
Oh yeah. Anyway, so he's Palestinian. But we were talking about the contrast between Maghrebi culture and European cultures. That's Western Arabs, or however you want to put them. Because in France, you see that all the time, and their attitudes towards friendship and what have you. So it really does vary from place to place. It's not. This isn't some kind of universal dictum. But yeah, does veganism isolate you, or does it unite you with people you have something meaningful in common with? The answer is both. Yeah. And I see the tragedy of that. But as Socrates said, the unexamined life is not worth living. I don't think anyone who's vegan wants to go back to, because you can do it. You can just not tell people you're vegan. You could just lie and say you're lactose intolerant. You could just make up an excuse when people offer you a hot dog, and it's not hard to lie. You can get used to it, and you'll see how different your life is when you just don't tell people you're vegan. And if you think that's going to bring something positive into your life, you can give that a try for a month. You really could. Instead of the 30-day vegan challenge, 30-day continue being vegan but pretend you're not vegan challenge, and you will see just how little positive brings to your life. Sure, and it plunges you back into that undifferentiated world of trying to make conversation about football and ice hockey games. Yeah.
Is there a 2-year challenge to that? Because if there is, I think I destroyed that completely.
Oh, yeah?
Nobody in my school thought I was vegan. And it came down to a point where we had this seminar or this gathering, and one of the administrators or the event creators, right, they ended up asking people for food. So who's vegetarian? I look around. Right, what am I going to say, right, vegan? And then to my left is Dr. Richard Wright. He's very well profound in the criminological literature. I didn't know he was I didn't know he was vegetarian either. He's been vegetarian for 22 years. Huh. We both look at each other and we're like, oh, wow, I guess we're the only two in the room. Huh. And they bring out the food and they have these wraps. And I remember specifically, this was the first time I ever told anybody at school that I was vegan. A friend of mine, her name is Taylor, right? She looks at me, she's like, I didn't know you're vegetarian. And I said, oh, I'm not, I'm vegan. And she's like, no, you're not. Like, she's denying me of what I eat. And I said, no, I'm vegan. She's like, how long have you been vegan? And I said, March of 2016. Yeah. And she's like, what? I could have sworn I saw you eat. I'm like, no. Yeah, so then she started questioning what I'm eating, right? And I dissected that entire wrap. I'm like, tomato, lettuce, okay, no sauce, no cheese. Okay, we're good. Is that an avocado? Okay, we're good. She's like, oh, is that bread vegan? Oh, my God. So for 2 years straight, nobody had known about my lifestyle because while it was a part of me, they just don't need to know. It's just one of those things. Yeah. So, and in a way, if I felt like if I did tell them, they would look at me differently. They probably wouldn't have the same conversations that we usually have, which usually it's just about some sort of article that we read about rape or some controversial topic. So,
well,
that's where
for me,
the dividing line is.
For me, there's a direct contrast. I have Jewish heritage. I don't have Arabic heritage, but I do kind of look Arabic, and there's a reason, because if you go back just...
My mom asked me whether you were from the Middle East or something, because we're Palestinian, right?
Right. Some people guess Persian for me, right? Yeah.
Just like, look at his eyebrows. I'm like, Mom, he's kind of Jewish, though. He's not Jewish, but he was raised.
Yeah. So but I hate to tell you this, but if you go back just 5,000 years, Jews and Arabs were the same people. Genetically, it's branches from the same tree, so it's no wonder. But for me, there's a direct contrast between veganism and alcohol. I do not drink alcohol, and I quit drinking alcohol an incredibly long time ago. But I normally in social situations, I not only don't draw attention to that, I conceal it. Like, I just go and get a drink, like whatever it is, Sprite or something, whatever, And, I just don't mention what I'm drinking to people, and they assume I am drinking alcohol. Now, why is that? It is in some ways, well, I don't want them to feel judged. And the reality is I do judge them. I do kind of look down on people who, I don't want them to think, I'm superior and they're inferior. And the reality is, yes, I really do think it's superior to be sober than drink. I do believe, alcohol causes brain damage. But that's not the point. Alcohol, if you drink alcohol, you are only harming yourself. If you eat meat, you are not only harming yourself. So, there is a difference. I'm not an anti-alcohol activist. And, I could be. I mean, it seems unlikely. I can imagine. Much earlier in this conversation, I mentioned, Mothers Against Drunk Driving and so on. I see how you can become passionate about that kind of... But just, let's put it this way. You can become a sobriety activist. I think that is a meaningful thing to pursue. But for me, there's that direct contrast of not particularly broadcasting my sobriety And on the contrary, openly broadcasting the issue with veganism and letting people know, like, look, you can change today. Nobody was born this way. Yeah.
Exactly.
So this is your decision. What's stopping you? So yeah. Okay, can we wrap it up there? We're just coming up on about 2 hours for the conversation.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we had one more topic, but if you want to close it there, that's fine
Good.
with me.
We can maybe write it down and leave it for next time. Yeah, because I think that's a good conversation.
Yeah.
2-hour podcast. Okay, wonderful.
That sounds good to me. It's been a pleasure. For those of you that are watching this and have actually reached the end or just wanted to skip to the end, I'm going to link Aizl Mazar's channel on the bottom. It's called à-bas-le-ciel. So I'll leave a link in the description. I'll probably upload my video later in the day, so you can download it yourself, share it with your audience. And if anybody, I'm just going to put this out there so I don't seem dishonest. If anybody from your channel wants to come and subscribe to mine, because I am a vegan channel, I am a fitness channel. If they want to see some other form of entertainment, feel free to subscribe. You don't have to, but it would do me justice.
Sure.
Give me more purpose to make videos.
Yeah, and
so thank you for
I
that.
have always been about promoting smaller vegan channels. If you were watching my channel's going on more than 4 years. I used to really actively reach out to and collaborate with and promote sometimes channels that had like 10 viewers, really that small. I've always been about that. And it's kind of sad to see that in 2018, there's really a lot less synergy. There's a lot less cooperation going on within the vegan movement than ever. And I think that actually reflects greater pessimism than ever. People are not as optimistic that they can just kind of make a few YouTube videos and then put together a meetup and get 200 people to show up at a protest or demonstration. And that is what happens. I've known channels who've done that, who've got, real life events with 200 people turning up in person. So people do need sources of optimism and things to be hopeful about. There is a lot to be hopeful about. But it's not money. If you think you're going to make money on YouTube, that's not what you should be optimistic about. But everything else, there are a lot of other things, motivations other than money that are worth being optimistic about. And ultimately, every political movement is based on colleagues, friendship, mutual trust, association. You got to make friends. You got to get out and shake hands with people. At any level of politics. And the next step for vegan politics involves a lot of people like me and Captain Weiner here figuring out how much they have in common and how little they have in common and how we can build on that common ground. So it was great meeting you. This is the first time we ever talked. In case you guys wonder, we never said one word to each other before this. It's the first conversation, and let's see what we can do with the vegan movement in the next 5 years. Maybe the start of a beautiful friendship.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Okay.